Hey everyone, Eklectix here. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I want to talk about my personal experience with this set, Murders at Karlov Manor, specifically with the limited format, which are sealed in draft. So far, I've logged 22 limited events. I played 3 sealed events, which was 1 traditional sealed and 2 qualifier play-ins. I've done 19 drafts consisting of 14 premier drafts, 4 traditional drafts, and 1 quick draft. Out of the 22 limited events, I got 7 trophies, 2 in sealed and 5 in draft. MKM has been good to me. My win rate is at 63.2% at the moment, according to 17 Lands data. Let's go over my trophy decks. I named this deck Big Bustle. This is from my first game on MKM in Arena. It's a sealed deck that went 4-0 featuring Pyrotechnic Performer, Lamplight Phoenix, and Agris Cost, Spirit of Justice. It's a mid-range deck that chipped in early damage and was able to finish the game with cards like On the Job and Bustle. In one game, we did a bustle that flipped a crowd control warden, making it a 9-9, and although our opponent had a bigger board, we were able to push in for lethal. This deck is from the qualifier play-in. It's what I was able to brew from the sealed pool. It just had one rare, the Fugitive Codebreaker, that I was not able to take advantage of, but the deck just curved out. It has a bit of a battalion theme with Karlov Watchdog and Meddling Youths. I should say I got really lucky getting a trophy on this one because of the huge misplay on the very last match that I wasn't punished for. This is my first draft deck that trophied, which I aptly named Tappity Tempo because it's a tempo deck. As you can see, there's only 2 removal on this one, Makeshift Binding, and Dramatic Accusation. We tempo with Out Cold, Crime Stopper Sprite, and Granite Witness. It didn't have a lot of problems because I was constantly tapping opponents' creatures to get them out of the way to push damage. Bubble Smuggler also surprised opponents, becoming a huge 6-5 in the late game. No bombs on this one. Novice Vigilantes is yet another Boros deck. No bombs again, but it features 3 Novice Inspectors. We got great draws in this draft, which means Inspector on turn 1 most of the time. I also decided to play 16 lands only because of the low curve and cheap removal. Something I discovered after about 3 games in is that there's no way for our opponent to catch up if they wanted to race. Perimeter Enforcer and Sanguine Savior padded our life total. Lightning Helix and Makeshift Binding doubling as removal and life gain. I draft this deck again. Here's my first foray into a green deck featuring Vanifar Evolved Enigma. This deck didn't have too much trouble going into the mid game because we had Tunnel Tipster letting us cast Loxodon Eavesdropper on turn 3, or just giving us enough mana to hold up Repulsive Mutation, which is OP in this deck. In one match, it made an 8-9 Hellion and prevented it from getting torched. It also has Case of the Trampled Garden, which is solved with ease because we were protecting our big boys with Airtight Alibi. This deck has Archdruid's Charm, and the one time we drew it, we didn't even need it to close out the game. Rockbags has 4 rares. Krenko's Buzz Crusher, Lost in the Maze, and 2 Surveil lands. This is the Izzet deck in MKM, which is Artifact Sacrifice Synergy. A lot of cards benefit from one another. For creatures, we got the Gleaming Drake, Crime Novelist, Furtive Courier, Benthic Criminologist, and even the Gearbane Orangutan becomes a 4-4 with Reach. Supplying the artifact sack is dear old Harriet. We got not 1, not 2, but 3 Detective Satchels. This deck was able to somehow beat an insane deck that had multiple bombs like Niv Mizzet. If you're interested, go check out my video I won against Niv. At first glance, Smorkin Detectives doesn't look like it'll trophy. That's what I thought anyway. But it did. Cryptic Coat was just a bomb on the games we drew it. With the help of Projector Inspector, it got us to where we had playables all the time. Since there's a lot of flyers, we were happily chipping away at our opponent's life total every turn. In one game, we had a huge Crime Stopper sprite with due diligence and thinking cap attached to it that our opponent couldn't answer. As its namesake, we went face all the time, which resulted in a trophy. After all the games, here's what I figured out in Karlov Manor. 1. Disguise plays out differently from its predecessor, the Morph. Cons was just released on Arena, so I have a little experience with the format. In Cons, there was a 5 mana rule with Morphs. It's where a flipped Morph will most likely eat a non-flipped Morph, so blocking wasn't a viable option once a player hits 5 mana. The same rule applies in MKM, although there are a lot of more creatures with Disguise for less than 5 mana with relevant abilities that get you considerable value. It feels more like extra action rather than just getting a bigger creature once it's flipped. The best example is the Granite Witness, where you can flip it for 2 Azorius mana and you get to tap a creature. Everyone was touting this card as a card you would include in a deck that's either white or blue, meaning you didn't need to specifically be an Azorius. It's flexible because you can include it in Izzet decks where you can spend 2 blue mana to flip it, or in Orzhov decks using 2 white mana to flip it instead. But to me, its disguise ability is more valuable than just being a flexible include in the decks. Because of this, I rate this card higher now. Another example is the Nervous Gardener. It trades with other morphs, but its flip ability that only needs 1 green mana lets you grab another land from your library. So not only does it replace itself, but it enables base green decks to splash those busted rares and mythics from other colors. So I feel like disguises have more utility in Karlov Manor rather than just flip and get bigger. Number 2. Green is a lot of fun, but don't ignore 2-drops. In any limited format, 2 colors is optimal for a coherent deck. 3 colors might be pushing it. But I think in MKM, being base green, ramping, and splashing the other colors, or going into 5 colors, is an exquisite experience. Besides drafting cards like Escape Tunnel, Public Thoroughfare, They Went This Way, and Nervous Gardener, the payouts are substantial with cards like Niv Mizzet, Doppelgang, and Pull. The most important thing to note is that 2-drops should not be ignored. The essential green card to slow down aggro, it has to be Vitu-Ghazi Inspector. Its 1/3 body provides an early blocker, and in the late game, its Collect Evidence ability gives 2 life and a +1/+1 counter. Great for stabilizing the board. Another card that's overlooked is Aftermath Analyst. Like the Vitu-Ghazi Inspector, it's a good blocker early on, then sack it later to get those milled lands back in play so you can cast Doppelgang for 3 to turn the game around. So explore and enjoy green, but don't forget those 2-drops. Number 3, Aggro Reign Supreme. Although being base green will let you cast the cool cards, it doesn't stop a well-built aggro deck. It doesn't even need bombs, although they help you get that W. As with any other formats, if you can curve out, you got a high chance of winning. It's more apparent in this set. Because of this, guys, you're kind of pegged on turn 3. So a lot of games go through turns 1 and 2 without any plays. If you're green or splashing, that probably means public thoroughfare on turn 2. Well, not doing anything in the first 2 turns most likely means you're behind if your first play is a disguised creature on turn 3. Aggro in this format is not limited to Boros. My most successful one is Boros, but I've seen success with Azorius. Anything you pair with white can be aggressive. Orzhov has Wisp Drinker Vampire that's overlooked in draft because I've seen it wheel multiple times, but I've lost to it and the games weren't even close. Number 4. Combat tricks are stronger than removal. I found it easier holding up combat tricks than straight up removal because you don't have to worry about the ward cost. Unless you have one of the can't be countered spells, it's easier to cast tricks like Auspicious Arrival, the Chase is On, and Eliminate the Impossible with the added bonus of getting a clue token so you get a card back. Murder should be a top common, but because of the disguise mechanic, giving ward 2 to creatures, murder usually costs 5. That means that most removals are inefficient. Even shock will cost 3 if you want to get rid of that warded blocker. Tricks also benefit from your disguised creatures because the opponent has to spend more mana to remove it, so it's safer to cast it. So try and time your tricks that target your creatures rather than pay for hefty removals. And that's it. I hope it helps. If you have better tips for me, please comment below and let me know. Like and subscribe for more MTG content. More drafts to come. Till then, Eklectix out.